Readings on Indian literatures, Small Towns and the River, Mamangdai. Intro. Mamangdai is a poet, novelist, and journalist from Pasighat, Arunachal Pradesh. She was born into the Adi tribe, one of the most populous groups of indigenous peoples in Arunachal Pradesh. Mamangdai received Sahitya Academy Award in 2017 for her novel The Black Hill. She was also awarded Padma Shri in 2011. Background. The poem Small Towns on the River is to be read in the background of the never ending tensions between the natives and the migrants from other parts of India. The violent clashes often lead to massive bloodshed, which is a regular feature. Summary. Small Towns and the River by Mamang Dai is a poem about life, death, and mortality, contrasted with immortality and eternal bliss. First, the poem presents a dusty and gloomy picture of small towns. Days are filled with life and death. Only rituals are permanent. Then she feels that the river has a soul. The river grieves in summer. It knows its origin and end. It also knows that water is immortal. The poet remembers her happy childhood, but life in the small town is full of anxiety for the future. However, death also brings in hope and optimism, at least in the life after life, that they can walk with the gods. Essay. Question. Life and death. Life and death. Only the rituals are permanent. Comment on the eternity of nature in contrast to the temporality of human existence discussed in the poem. Mamang Dai is an Indian poet, novelist, and journalist from Pasighat, Arunachal Pradesh. In the poem Small Towns and the River, she portrays the eternity of nature in contrast to the impermanence of human existence. The poet says that small towns remind her of death. Her hometown lies calmly amidst the trees. It is the same in summer and winter, dusty and windy. In small towns, each day brings in news of someone's death. That makes people sad. Days are all about life and death. Life is short lived, only the rituals are permanent. The river has a soul. In summer, it cuts through the land like a torrent of grief. Sometimes the river seems to hold its breath to look for a land of fish and stars. From the first drop of rain on the dry earth and the mist on the mountain tops, it crosses the town. The river knows that the water is immortal. The happy pictures of childhood contrast with the anxiety of small towns for the future. The dead are placed pointing west and they shed off the burden of life. When the soul rises, it will walk into the golden east, the house of the sun. These hope revives the poet with new energy. Life is like the sunlight that warms the cool bamboo. In small towns by the river, she wants to walk with the gods. Death also brings in hope and optimism for a better life after life. The poem highlights the impermanent nature of human life. However, the beauty of the poem is born when it is contrasted with the eternity and permanence of nature. Short answer. Question 1. What does the poet mean by dreadful silence? The silence is due to the death of someone. The death is dreadful reminder of the impermanent and mortal nature of human life. This is what the poet means by dreadful silence. Question 2. The river has a soul. What does the poet mean by this expression? According to the poet, the river has a soul. It is a living being in summer with very little water. It cuts through the land like a torrent of grief. Sometimes it seems to hold its breath to look for a land of fish and stars. The river knows that water is immortal. Why the dead are placed pointing west. The dead are placed pointing west because when the soul rises, it will walk into the golden east, the house of the sun. The poet means that the human soul is immortal. Question 4. Comment on the expression torrent of grief. The poet says that in summer the river cuts through the land like a torrent of grief. It is a metaphor that portrays the flow of the river as the outpouring of grief. Question 5. Do you think the poem ends with an optimistic note? If yes, give reasons. Question 5. Do you think the poem ends with an optimistic note? If yes, give reasons. The poet says that in small towns by the river, they all want to walk with gods in eternal bliss. Death also brings in hope for a better life after life. The poem ends with an optimistic note. Why do the small towns grow with anxiety for the future? The small towns grow anxious about the future. It is anxiety about death that is sure to come to everyone in the near future. Explain the expression sad wreath of few roses. It is sadness associated with funeral. The sadness of the occasion is transferred to wreath. It is an example of the figure of speech, transferred epithet. Paragraph. Question 8. Comment on the elements of pantheism in the poem. Pantheism is a doctrine that identifies God with the universe. It regards universe as a manifestation of God. The poet, like the people of a tribe, believes in the philosophy of pantheism. To her, nature is alive with spirits, a living presence. Mountains, rivers, and trees are worshipped. Dai says that the river has a soul. In summer, it cuts through the land like a torrent of grief. The poet says that sometimes the river seems to hold its breath to look for a land of fish and stars. The river knows that water is immortal. Mamangdai says, in small towns by the river, we all want to walk with gods. Question 9. Discuss the literary device used in the poem. In the poem Small Towns and the River, Mamangdai uses several literary devices. In the first stanza, the hometown is personified. Most of the lines are connected by the device called enjambment. In the expression sad wreath of tube roses, the poet uses the device called transferred epithet. The sadness of the occasion is transferred to the wreath. When the poet says the river cuts through the land like a torrent of grief, he uses a simile for comparison and a metaphor in torrent of grief. In the expression mist on the mountain tops, There is alteration in the repetition of M sound. The line, "the river has a soul," is used as a refrain. Question 10. Comment on the mood of the poem that highlights the sadness and stagnancy of the human world in contrast to the vigor and movement of the natural world. Small Towns and the River by Mamang Dai presents a dusty and gloomy picture of small towns that remind her of death. In small towns, each day brings in news of someone's death that makes people sad. Days are all about life and death. In contrast, the poet also depicts the vigor of the river that flows by the towns. The river has a soul. In summer, it cuts through the land like torrent of grief. Sometimes the river seems to hold its breath to look for a land of fish and stars. In this way, the poem highlights the sadness and stagnancy of the human world in contrast to the vigor and movement of the natural world. The mood changes from sadness to hope and optimism in the end.